Okay. All right, we're going to give people a few minutes to get in, and then we'll get started. If you have questions, type them in the chat, and either Megiddo or Noah will ask me, or I will see it, and I will answer. Kind of built-in time to take care of questions into what I'm going to cover. So we will go from there. Just give people a chance to filter in for a few minutes. And this time I don't really have to run the stream, so that's better for me anyway. Megiddo's running the stream, so everyone give a shout out to him if you're ready for doing that work. I don't think I put my gloves on in a while, so that's pretty exciting. I think we're supposed to start now at 7, right?
Yeah, I think the messaging on this wasn't as good as the last one.
Okay.
I think the important thing is to get at least a week ahead. This was 2 days, and then there wasn't enough.
Yeah. No, we're good. We're good. Yeah. Oh yeah, I wanted to share this, and let me take one glove back off so I can actually control my mouse. I did want to share this to the OGN page real quick so those people can know as well if they don't follow Sword Night Boot Camp.
Share it over to Facebook.
You have access to one Grand Nation, but that's okay. Let's see what else. All right. And one more share, and then I'll get started. It's at the bottom.
Settings.
Oh no, you do it like you do it right by all the emojis and stuff when you actually open up the stream, and then right by where you can comment, share. Yeah.
Settings.
Oh, the event says 8. Oh, yeah, it must have been a typo. Oh no, you do it like but you do it right by all the emojis and stuff when you actually open up people. And you know, we'll go from there. But I will get started here. All right, so what we're going to cover today is range and footwork, and the important parts for foam fighting, obviously. But what the point to range and footwork are in foam fighting and in many combat sports is to gain an optimal position on your opponent, which basically minimizes their advantages and maximizes yours. So you want to minimize the opportunities they have to hit you and maximize your opportunities to hit them. You know, and there's all kinds of variables that play into that, but when you boil it down, why you're moving and, you know, why you're maintaining range or closing in range is because you think that there's an advantage in that space. So that's why you would want to, you know, control range. And then obviously I tie these two together because you mostly, not 100%, but you mostly control range with your feet. So I just feel like these two topics go together really well and should be handled as a unit. A lot of times, and in a case like this especially, I think we can handle it as a unit. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about understanding your own range and how you can do that effectively, because obviously knowing yourself is the most important part. So you have to be super tuned in, keyed in onto what your range is. And we'll cover some things. You can see over my shoulder, I got my punching bag set up. I got a comb back there that you can't see. We'll cover some things on how to do that, right? But I just want to kind of let you know where we're going to go. So we're going to talk about understanding your own range, some tricks and tips to do that, how it differs based on your lead foot a little bit, and that's going to blend over into footwork as well a little bit. But we'll go back to it when we talk about footwork. We're going to talk about range first and then footwork, although, like I said, they're going to blend. Effective defense at range, and then implied threats at all ranges, which is important, right? So that's essentially what we're talking about in range and footwork. We'll talk about lateral movement and why you want to do it and what direction means what. You know, what you're doing depending on yourself and your opponents. Slight movements. This is we'll get to it, but why we want to use slight movements. We're going to talk about the power of the lead foot switch, which I think is a super powerful thing. We'll talk about a rocker step. We'll talk about a skip step, and then again, slight movements when backing out. So slight movements when moving, and then even like when controlling and distancing. We'll talk about some slight movements then too. We'll make time for questions and all that as well. And I often get off on other topics, so you know, we'll definitely fill up the time that we have, which I believe my goal is an hour and a half at the most, starting from now, not starting from 7. And you know, maybe we'll beat that by a little bit because there's not as much interaction here, although I do want you guys to ask all the questions that you have. Normally when I'm teaching these classes, I'm not teaching it to a camera, I'm teaching to a bunch of people, and there's a ton of interaction, and I put drills in and stuff like that, but we won't be able to do any of that. So, you know, please ask questions, and if you need to, and we'll go from there. All right, so understanding your own range and kind of how to key that in. We're going to come out here. I need gear. All right. It's a little bit close now. So essentially, I don't care what you call them, long, short, you know, red, yellow, green, like X, Z, Y, B, Q, T, don't care. You call it whatever you want. But I generally go long, medium, and short. That's what I call them, but you know, I have no arguments with whatever you call them. Okay. At long range for yourself, and remember, first we have to know ourselves. Long range, it'll be just where your sword can at least effectively hit its target. Right? So that's without like crazy lean, right? And crazy lunges, right? Just crazy lunges. We'll talk a little bit about movement and how to do that later. But static kind of long range where you can just hit without breaking your stance, right? Without breaking your good base stance, okay? And how do you know that? Well, obviously you're gonna have to key it in a little bit. So find your pal, find your partner, you know, do it when you're sparring a little bit, and get a feel for what that long range is. And if you change lengths, right? And this is super important. And a lot of people don't realize that this is important, but it's very important. This is a 38 and a 36, right? It's not a ton of difference, but it's super important because my range increases, and that means a ton, right? So at the 36, you know, I'm kind of there at the end of this cone. But at the 38, a little bit further, right? I can come back a little bit, probably about 2 inches, right? I mean, it's kind of obvious that it's not. But you got to really get that keyed in. So if you're going to be using different range swords, always kind of range in your sword if you're going to use a new one that's a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. I mean, if you're going to roll out with the 28 or 26, range that thing in and know what your effective distance is so you can get there. That's super important, okay? So, but how can I know, you know, I'll get this with a feel for it, and I should, you know, kind of intuitively, but the secret here is toes, okay? My toe is above, my shoulder is above my toe, right? That's my point. If you go up my toe, you know, my body is there. Can I stick it out a little bit? Yeah, but nobody reasonable would do that, right? And when you lean forward with your knee too, then what? Everything comes forward. You know, you don't generally stand like this. So if you get your range from your toe to your opponent's toe, okay? So I don't have to spend a ton of time, and look, you can see their toe without looking down. You know where your toe is, and you can look your opponent in their eye and see their toe. So I don't want you all to start doing this and just staring down at toes, and now I'm exaggerating a little bit. The point stands, right? You can't fight like this. So you gotta be able to get to the point where you're comfortable with where your toe is and you can see their toe. And you just get that feel. It helps you get that easier feel for range. Okay? So that's the big secret. Toes. Use your toe, use their toe. It gives you a good sense, right? After you've ranged in your sword and you understand, right, the length and where you're going to be effective. And remember, I said effective, okay? And we'll talk about some closing stuff in a little bit, but where you can at least effectively hit targets that are open, all right? That's going to be your long. And then you tell the toes, all right? And that leads me to something before we go on. You want to be effective from all your ranges, right? You can't, if you say, oh, I'm only a good close range fighter, well, that's awesome that you know that, and that's perfect. But you need to work on having an effective threat at mid-range, having an effective threat at long range. If you say, oh, I'm only a long range fighter, you need to work at having an effective threat close and mid. Like, you have to be able to, if you're only effective from one range, better opponents are going to quickly figure that out. And what will they do? They'll avoid that range. You know, they'll make sure that they either stay in that effective range for you as little time as possible, because they'll know you don't have any answers for them on the inside, or maybe you don't have answers for them on the outside, right? So you have to at least have some amount of implied threat from every range. Now, that's your range. Remember that, and this is very important. That's your range. You don't have to have an implied threat from your opponent's long range. If I'm fighting Arthon or Draknar at their longest range, they're taller than me and their arms are longer. It's not realistic for me to tell you have an implied threat at their long range. You won't have one, right? Can you counter their arm? Certainly. You could. Yes, that's something you could do. But you don't have an implied opening threat from long range, their long range, and that's fine. My point is having an implied threat from your long range, from your medium range. Everyone's short range is kind of the same, right? The way I view short range, you're talking board to board, right? So long range is the end of your sword. Medium, I call medium kind of the dead zone, right? Where you're inside your range and their range. You don't want to stay there a ton unless you know your defense is spot on against this opponent. And even then, you want to be careful. You don't want to just hang out in there, is my point. You want to kind of get your way in there, throw what you're going to throw, and if it doesn't work, you know, either close in tight where they don't know what they're doing, or dip back out to long and to go from there. So that's offense. Now, defense, effective defense at all ranges. If you don't know how to block on the inside, most everyone knows how to block from the outside, right? It's longer range. You can generally see the shots coming. It's easier to block, right? shots that are coming from further away. That's a true story. Medium range, it gets a little tougher to start blocking shots, right? And then short range, it can be super hard to defend. Well, that's fine. Still got to learn, right? And so what do I recommend to do that? I don't have anything to show you, but I have a drill I like to recommend. And I'll describe it to you because I can't show you. But or I can show you a little bit. But essentially, if you're sorting board, use sorting board. If you're flow, you can use flow. Single even, you can use whatever. But what you do is you touch your board to their board, okay? And then you count down 3, 2, 1, and then you start. Go right into the point. The first time Eric and Isaac did this, they told me about it. They went 3, 2, 1, go, and they both jumped way back to long range and then started fighting. And that's not the point to it, right? You want to stay inside 3, 2, 1, and then it's this kind of movement, right? And this is the kind of way that you're going to defend with sorting forward, right? See, 1, I'm choked all the way up because I'm deep inside. 2, I'm using a little bit, if I'm going to stay in here, I'm using my knees a lot more and a little bit more lean than I would use from the outside. Outside, I use a little more footwork. Inside, I'm going to use a little bit more of this lean, and my shoulders are going to be tight, right? Nothing big, because it's easy for them to chop, right? That's what the inside game looks like, you know? And then you face stuff, and then maybe you dip over here. But see how I'm still staying real tight with it, my board's still right here? If I move this way too, right, against a right-handed fighter, right, I'm blocking off the planes they want. Even a left-handed fighter, if they want to get on this, like the people are going to go high when you're inside. It's just a strange thing that people have. I'm not saying it's 100% true. So definitely keep your board up. Keep your sword in a good defensive position. Don't move where you can catch these things. That's how you defend on the inside, basically, right? And it's going to take some learning. So that drill, perfect for you to do that. You know, medium range, the principles of defense we covered them last week, but I'll cover them real quick. Obviously, keep your board up, keep your stance good. Don't hang out here, right? Do what you're going to do and get out of this range, because I call it the dead zone. Either you're going to be effective or you're going to get dead real quick. So you want to be effective and get out so you don't end up dead. And then, like I said, long range, it's easy. Like from here, I can see stuff coming. I'm pretty comfortable. I don't really have any worries about stuff not far away in general. I'm not saying that there's not effective shots that I never get hit from there, but I'm really, really comfortable defending from there. So is most everyone too, by the way. Defending from long range is the easiest one. So definitely get used to that. Okay, now we talked mostly about static things thus far. And again, if you guys have questions, fire them away. I'm happy to answer them in the course. You don't have to wait until the end. We've talked about static stuff so far. So we're going to get into a little bit of footwork, even though we're going to talk a lot about footwork in the second half of this class. But think about the first thing we need to talk about is your effective range based on your lead foot. And now we're going to talk about closing stuff, right? Because it's not realistic to think that you're going to come from here and just stay like this and throw shots, right? Like a fight doesn't happen that way. Movement happens, okay? So the first method to tighten up range on people, right? If we start this cone, we get our toes, you know, we're in long for us, basically. Right? Can't really hit from here. So this is long. But the first thing we're going to talk about is we move a little bit right enough that I don't care too much. We'll talk about what that means in a little bit. But we want to just slowly take away a little bit. So if we start behind the cone and we move right, see how our foot slides up a little bit? But it's not obvious because, especially to dedicated backpedalers, the minute I make a forward step, they're gone, right? Like they're going to just disappear. Why? Because they're trying to keep a range on you that they prefer. So you got to do it more slow and subtle. Move, take a little bit away at a time, right? A little bit away at a time. Until you find that spot where you can throw your thing. As you get closer, right, you generally want to imply a threat. So you're going to throw a shot, you're going to close. I want to imply something, threaten something. Twitch, some kind of thing, or some kind of open, imply threat, finish, right? So my point is you don't want to come in with nothing. We want to have a jab. Kind of close range or cover stuff, right? Smoke even. And see how we close that up now through a nice tight range. But now we got them in our sword, we're that deep into it, right? Whereas before we were just touching, right? Now we move to here, right? And we apply the threat, watch, right? And we get closer every time, right? Until we apply a threat. Until we're ready to hit. We're not going to hang out there either. Remember, I'm just showing you this so you can see. It's not like we're going to hang out in there forever. We're going to get there, right? Same thing if you move to the left. We're going to get closer every time. And see how my back foot comes. Here, when I move to the left, back foot comes. When I move it right, my back foot. Not stepping with my front foot because I would cross, right? So you don't want to cross your feet when you're moving. These slight movements, right? And I'm keeping my feet, like we talked about last week, keep my feet low to the ground. Sliding, so I'm not taking massive steps. One, I don't want to scare. Two, I don't want to be heavy on my foot while I'm moving, right? I want to minimize the time that I'm heavy on my feet so I can get countered. So these slight movements, and I'll show you, right? Pull. And as we go to we're going to take a big closing step, right? We're going to slide our back foot up, okay? We're going to slide our back foot up, and boom, we'll take that left foot step to close, right? So I'm way back here to come, right? We're in our long range, do a range check for you guys as you see. I'm not making it up. I haven't come to the alternate, but I don't really need it anymore. And you'll get that one too. Slide the back foot up. Right, we make our post. Slide the back foot up, threaten, close, right? Little skip step there. Okay. That works and it's fine, right? This slide your back foot up step thing, it's fine and it works. It's good. But I want you guys to see something. Trying to make sure everything's out of the way. Okay. Right, if I'm here, and I slide my back foot up, okay, and I take a step, a reasonable closing step, not I'm compromising my stance step, where I'm really heavy on my front foot, right, and it's hard for me to get out now, but a reasonable closing step. So I slide my back foot up, take a closing step, okay? Look, I can get, or I'll put this sword right here. That's where I can get. Essentially with my closing step. This is where we talk a little bit about a lead foot switch, just a touch. Right? I'm here, get on behind the cone, so you can see I'm not trying to cheat. And instead of sliding my back foot, I can take a step with my right foot. Okay? Then reasonable step where I don't want to want to overcommit.
Hey James.
So come here. Yeah.
Your lead foot is falling behind the door.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You might want to
this one?
Yeah, just close the range up.
Yeah. So
A little closer.
Here we go. Good?
Yeah, right there, both your feet are in front.
Okay. We'll push our target back a little bit. Right? So here, we lost our marker, but I know what it is, but I'll show you guys again. Right? Slide my back foot up, reasonable closing step. So it's right, that's mid my foot. Okay? If I'm going to close with my right foot, now I do a lead foot switch, right? Same thing, I can get past that by a pretty long distance, right? And I told you about toes, right? It's it's about this much difference, right? Which doesn't seem like a lot, but in our game, you know, that much of a sword length is a ton of difference, right? And that's why I talk about the power of the lead foot switch, right? Because if I keep the same lead all the time, anyone smart will know, just kind of looking at me and based on how tall I am, right? How far I can step out without compromising. So what are they going to try to do? Anyone who's going to try to fight you that's good is attacking your stance first. That's what they're trying to do. What is a feint trying to do? Get you to compromise your stance. What is a combo trying to do? Get you to compromise your stance, right? I mean, if you're wide open and your stance is compromised to begin with, they can just hit you. I get that. But in general, you're attacking someone's stance first. If you can get them to get in a position, what did I say, that's not optimal for them and advantageous for you, that's what we're trying to accomplish, right? So that's why if we switch leads, we can get much further, and much is not, doesn't seem like much, but again, like covered is, than if we slide our back foot, no matter what your lead foot is, right? Now, obviously your weapon is in, whatever hand your weapon is in, and where your lead foot is gonna have a big part of your range, right? So if your right foot lead and you step left, you have to understand that. What does it do? Well, it brings your defense forward, but your offense kind of stays where your right foot was. Your reach is still the same. So be aware of that. But if your left foot's forward and you only have a weapon in your right hand and you step, then your right foot in your hand give you the range that you're gonna have. That's why if your left foot lead, and you step with your right foot, you're gonna get a good distance, good close, right? So that's why the lead foot switch is powerful, because people don't really expect you to have that much range that suddenly. So you want to kind of use it in those situations. And there's stuff to be said for bringing your defense far forward and stepping into a left foot lead switch. That does something as well. What does it do? Well, you could do a double switch then, right? Which we'll get into footwork. I don't want to get into it too much. So yeah, we're going to get into it, but not too much.
So James, is your weight distributed 50-50 front and back, and are you on the ball of your feet, or are you flat-footed? It looks like your heels are down. So can you explain that?
Generally speaking, I'm 50-50, 60-40 as far as my weight's distributed. And then you want to be where you engage your hips, and then you're on the balls of your feet a little bit. You can't stay like this all the time, obviously, but when you move, like you take a step, right, you want to come up on your toe while your back foot slides, right? And that's your movement. That's kind of how you move. In general, when you stand, you know, if you stand up on your toes all the time, it'd take you some work to get there. You could do it, but if you have your hips engaged, your knees engaged, then the movement's fine. It's there, and you can go. So I'd say I'm not completely flat-footed, but also not like completely on my toes either. That's kind of a confusing answer, but if you play with it, you'll feel what I'm talking about. All right. So we talked about understanding your own range. It's important. Talked about using toes. Maybe just checking off my stuff. Effective range based on your lead foot, right? And we can switch it, right? But obviously we have more reach when our right foot's forward. That's a true statement. However, we have more of a closing distance when our left foot's forward, if we're talking about attacking with our right hand, right? And vice versa is true if you're left-handed, right? So just consider that as you're working on fighting and deciding which one to lead with. I used to say you would only want to lead with your shield foot because it was a strong defensive stance. I don't say that anymore. I think there's a lot of power in, and I'm not talking about power generation for shots. I'm talking about there's a lot of power. It's a very effective to switch leads, you know, just to throw people off, to give them a different look, right? And especially if they don't detect that you've done it, then their sense of range is thrown off because you've changed the reality of the fight, right? All right, we talked about effective distance and implied threats at all ranges, right? You want to be able to imply a threat at all ranges. If you don't have a shot for long, I'm not going to teach you them all here because I don't think we have time for that, but you want to learn a shot that's effective for long range. And by I say effective, I mean it's at least a threat. People have to react to it or get hit, right? And then we talked about closing with the jab. And obviously you have effective shots for medium if you don't have them for short. We talked about a drill you can use, right? Shield to shield. We talked about closing with the jab. So, you know, and a jab can be a feint. It doesn't have to be like an actual open, right? It can just be a feint. Just some kind of threat that makes them kind of rock back on their heels if they're not, especially if they're not paying attention, will help you as you're setting up your close. So you don't want to close without some kind of threat. Okay, now for footwork, we're going to talk about what direction you go and lateral movement and what it means, okay? When you're right-handed board, well, think about this. We don't even worry about board right now. When your offensive and defensive weapons are the same, right? Single, right? You're right for the lead. If you're moving left, you definitely want to keep this here one, but you're also moving into the teeth of their offense if they're also right-handed, right? So you want to keep it.
Hey James, I need you to speak to
the mic. Huh? Is it not loud enough?
No, just when you turn your head, the mic cuts out.
Okay. All right. So when you move to your left, I looked away again. When you move to your left, you're exposing stuff, right? Your defense is not there. So when you do that, this is one you want to be aware of it. I'm not saying you can't move left. There are good reasons to do it, right? If you're fighting a boardman, right? You're single and you're fighting a boardman. If he's right-handed, especially moving left can give you a shot at his hip, right? It can give you a good angle on his hip. But you want to do it from a good range. So you don't want to just come to the range and then start moving left because you're exposing a lot. Your defense better be real tight over here. It's going to be a struggle anyway. So in general, you want to be careful with it. But at a range where it's hard for them to hit you, it's easy for you to react. At long range, if they throw something at you, obviously it's easier for you to move out of the way, to get a block, like whatever the situation is. So if you're moving left, just be careful to do it at range. And then when you decide to go, you know, you would slide it back from pop, go for that hit maybe on that boardman. Okay. Now moving right, especially right for forward. You can move left right for forward too. You still kind of keep your defense there, but you know, it's hard to get blocks all the way over there. Not impossible, but harder, right? Moving right, your defense is already kind of in place, right? So you can get good blocks on anything thrown at you. So you can be a little, you should still be very careful, but you can be a little less careful, like you could be a little less careful when you're moving right because your defense is there. When you pick up a board or you pick up another sword, when you pick up a board, if you're right-handed, you're moving right, obviously your defense is all in a good spot. It's good. If you're moving left, you're exposing sword side hip. You're exposing sword side shoulder a little bit. So you just have to be aware of that. And again, keep that nice range and use your range a little bit as your defense so that you can see what they're going to throw and counter it off, right? So that's kind of the difference when you're moving right and left and what you're exposing. Will you be covering retreating counterattacks when your opponent is advancing with striking? Yes. Retreating counterattacks. Yes, we will be talking about that. And we'll be talking about the power of the lead foot switch again in that situation as well. All right. But, okay, moving right, stronger defensively if you're right-handed. Moving left if you're left-handed, stronger defensively. So you want to be careful about moving in a direction where your defense isn't and cover it with range so you have more time to react until you're ready to move. Boom, move in. Not saying you can't do it ever. There are reasons, like I said, expose, get angles on them, but you definitely want to cover it. All right, slight movements. You'll notice when I'm moving, even when I take closing steps, my movements are, right, it looks like this. When I have my gear, it looks like this. You're covering a little bit of time. When you take a closing step, even like a lateral closing step, boom, that's fine. It's a bigger step, but my stance stays good, and that's the most explosive it gets. You don't see me like, oh, right, making big old movements like that. In general, obviously every rule is made to be broken at certain times, right? Push all your chips to the middle and go for that shot that you see open. But in general, small movements, right? We keep our stance very nice and balanced no matter how we move. Keep our feet close to the ground again, so we're not exposed, even backwards, right? Small movements, all right? So slight movements. We call them microtransactions. Isaac and I took to call them microtransactions not that long ago, but it's all about, you know, keeping that balance, keeping on your you know, keeping your hips engaged, a little bit on the balls of your feet. You know, I told you before, your heels are going to come down some, but your weight shouldn't rest on them, right? Obviously, they're completely out of balance then. So if your stance is good, you'll feel it. You'll get that little bounce. All right, so slight movements is important. Now, the lead foot switch here in footwork is super powerful because I told you what it can do for your range, right? But it's unfortunate due to Corona, I can't have someone here to show you on. The Heart of the Nation still won't let me hit her, for example. So with foam, hit her with foam, right? But it gives you that angle, right? If you think about what we're trying to do when we take a lateral step, and I talked about it a little bit already when I talked about moving left, right? If I stay here and I take my closing step, you know, I have a good option here. Something here, though, their defense will probably be there, right? It'll be tougher, right? The way it is. So what you want, again, compromise their stance, right? So what you're looking for is to step outside their defense with this closing motion. If your foot is outside of their defensive foot, you'll have all kinds of things. And the crazy thing about that, so remember, that's very, very key. Getting your foot outside of their defense is super, super, super key. Okay? But the crazy thing about it is if I step over here and I get outside of their foot, so my foot gets outside of their foot or outside of their defense, their board, their sword, whatever, I get my foot on the outside, I can attack back at the hip on the other side, so I can attack sword side hip, right? Here, boom. And I have a better angle at it when this foot's outside their defense. If I keep my foot inside of their shield, try it sometime. When you have an opponent, since I can't show you, if you keep your foot inside of their shield and throw, sword side hip, they can get a block on it. If you can get outside their shield and throw that, you'll get a better angle on it and can make it hit. Okay? Same thing if you're trying to, like, a lot of people make the mistake of trying to go over the board. In general, you want to try to go around, right? I want to try to go around the board. So I'll step out to the right, I'll get my lead foot outside of their foot. And then this angle, if someone's foot is outside of my board, they can just throw their shot around and hit me instead of having to try to go into the teeth of my defense and go over. It's not the best option on any boardman unless they don't have a disciplined board, right? Their stance is already compromised. You can see that shoulder, right? Okay, yeah, sure, hit them, boom, no problem, right? But if they keep their board up in a good spot, your best bet isn't generally to go over it. There are ways to do it, but in general, you want to go around. So take that foot, boom, outside of their defense, throw. And like we talked about last week, and maybe a lot of you weren't here then, so I'll cover it again real quick. You throw your shot as that foot lands, right? So boom, and I can get around that board. So all kind of one motion. So here, I apply a threat, right? Pop, and I step and close, boom. Now we've put the whole thing together except for getting back to full defense after our shot, right? But come in, throw a jab, right? Throw a jab, and then step, pop, throw a finish, and then slide back, put in full defense if you missed, okay? That's kind of bringing it all together. And that was what? A lead foot switch. it gave us the angle we needed to finish, right? Where it's going to be harder if I stay left foot forward, right? For me to get outside their defense, right? I'm gonna have to really get ahead of them, and it's unlikely that I can get my left foot outside of their defense. So then I'm kind of playing a counter game, which isn't wrong, or these kind of openings here, they're all okay, but I can make my life easier a lot of times by being able to switch my right foot and get outside of their defense, okay? So that's it. Now, defensively, the power of the lead foot switch, and where we can answer Warren's question, right? So there's two things, retreating and counter strikes. You can just maintain, if I'm left foot forward, I can maintain that, right? What happens? This is what's important. I don't lift my left foot up and bring it to my right foot. The exposure time is longer. I bring my right foot back, right? And slight movements backwards all the time. Okay? So right foot leads. The direction you're going is generally left foot will lead, right? Generally speaking, whatever direction you're going is the foot that will lead the movement. It's not always the case, but in general it's the case, right? And then I look for things. One of my favorite counters while keeping range lately is this. Up into their arm from down here, put them underneath, right? That's a good range counter. Even without them swinging, so I apply a threat. Just because I'm moving backwards, quote unquote retreating, doesn't mean I'm ceding control of the fight, right? I can still control the fight while moving backwards. I keep my defense tight, I move, they get into a range I like, and then right into that arm. Okay? Going back. Just to show you real quick. That shot's done. You kind of loosen your grip on your sword a little bit, let it come down, and then tighten everything up at once and snap it up. Right? And you come from an odd angle on that one because people are used to this. A lot of people do that. That's one of Shion's specialties. He does this a lot. And I've used it some. It's an effective thing. They're used to that. So if you come from here, you're coming from an odd angle up into their sword arm, right? The important thing, tuck your elbow. If you don't tuck your elbow, what'll happen is one, you're exposed to an arm shot, right? But even maybe worse than that is you kind of block your own shot with their leg. If you're coming here to go up, and then if it's too far out, it just hits their leg and you get stopped. And now you're stuck out here, right? With your shoulder exposed and all that. So tuck your elbow, flip it up, right? Into that arm, okay? That's one counter. The other, there's a lot of counters while retreating, but another one that I like to use, obviously if someone throws, you can obviously just, right? You can't see me, right? This thing. So, right? They're trying to throw something at your shield, snap the arm, come right back, right? And we're retreating, right? Pop, pop. See, there's not a ton of motion. I'm not throwing big crosses and all that. I don't have to, right? Because they're bringing their offense out towards me. They're exposing their arm. So I'm just like, right? Come across my face, knife at that arm, come right back, right? That's another one I like to use. And then the other thing to remember here is, so far, I've been moving backwards, right? Properly with my feet. But look how much range I can cover, right? We're going to talk about the same thing in reverse. I can go here, right? Without compromising my stance. I don't want to do this, right? That's not good. So I keep it tight. I can only move so much. But if I switch leads, right? It's here. Here you go. We'll use the dog toy. Okay, my right foot's at this ball. Okay? my left foot still stays with that ball, right? Even if I take a retreating step, okay? So my defense is effectively forward, right? So I end up back here. Now, if I do this, right, and I use that same slide, I end up further back. So you can get, and especially if they're targeting over here, and you switch leads, bang, slide. Look how much further back I end up, okay? And in that course, can I do something? Yeah, of course I can. Can I do something? Yeah, of course I can. Here's a big principle of range, and it ties well into this exact thing. Someone has to close eventually so you can hit each other, right? So either you close the range or they do. It doesn't really matter to me, right? It's just effective to me to land my shot. In fact, it can be more effective if you let them control, if you let them think they're in control and they close, right? I'll give away that Megiddo loves this lead foot switch. He'll be mad at me for giving it away, by the way. Hopefully he doesn't turn off the stream. But, you know, a double board side goes, you know, real tight, long range shot, shield shoulder, right? If you're playing with a dedicated counter striker and they're going to come in on your motion, right? Boom, you throw that shield side. A regular double board side goes shield side, step. Remember that angle step, get outside your defense and finish, right? Notice I choked on the close, boom, outside. Well, that's me closing the distance, right? I can let them close the distance as well. So I throw that sword side shoulder, pop, hits their board. They close in on me. So instead of me having to make that distance, I can just switch, right? Now my right foot's forward to them as they're stepping, and I can finish on their way in. So when they think they're closing to finish me, you know, I throw the open, I step back, right over. 1, 2, you know, so that one's more of an over instead of an around because you're not taking an angle shot, but because you're switching leads and letting them close, oftentimes, especially if they don't have a very, very disciplined close, you can catch them on that shot. So the lead foot switch used in that way is super powerful. Retreating or aggressing, switching your leads is very advantageous and something you should definitely get used to doing. If you only ever fight right foot forward, or you only ever fight left foot forward, it's easy for your opponent to figure out methods of attack. Whereas if you switch it up all the time, they don't really know, oh, you're definitely going to do this and can't just go, I know that I'm safe if I do this or if I do that. Okay? Warren, let me know if that answered your question. And we'll keep moving on. But that's the power of the lead. So the power of the lead foot switch, like I said, that's it. Remember that. If you remember almost nothing else, remember toes, right? Toes to help you figure out your range versus their range. And remember the power of the lead foot switch. That one's going to be really good for you. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit now about some footwork tricks that I've picked up more recently. Well, at least 1 or 2 more recently. Actually, stepping outside of your opponent's defense is something I picked up watching my son play basketball. When his coach was talking about compromising people's stance so that you could break them down and go around them. So that's a new one that I've learned right from that. Like, hey, if we can compromise their stance, we can take big advantage of them. How can we do that? How can we compromise their defense and get outside of it? Okay, so that's something I learned from basketball, and this is another one from basketball. Because basketball is a sport where you attack people's stances, like I said, they have a lot of effective footwork things that you may or may not have been so prepared for or have seen. But another one is a rocker step, and this isn't just basketball. I know boxers and MMA fighters and people use this as well. But a rocker step is just a little jab step, pop, like you're going to come forward, but you don't come that far forward, but you give it some emphasis, right? It's like, oh, I'm coming. So you can imply a threat, right? It helps with that jab thing that we're talking about. If I throw a rocker on you and you make this big motion, I have a pretty good idea that you're going to do something similar to that next time. And it gives away kind of what you want to try to do. And it costs me very little, right? For me to throw a rocker, it doesn't cost me. I don't compromise my stance to throw it, right? Right? It's not a big deal, but because it will invoke something from them oftentimes. And if it does, you can store that information away, or you can capitalize on what they do, right? If you throw a rocker, right? And notice I do come forward a little bit. I don't just, it's not just to stomp in place, right? I come forward to touch. If I throw a rocker on someone and they like punch down, put all their weight on their back foot, well, now I know there's not a lot of places they can go. So I can use my lead foot switch, boom, and attach their compromised stance. Because they put so much weight on their back foot, I've got a little window in that space because they reacted to my rocker to attack that that stance compromise that they did. So rocker, boom, step, and go for your finish. All right, that's super powerful. Just a little tip, right? Just to tell you, I'm gonna get him, and then you can do nothing. You can do what I said. You know, you can next time throw a rocker into a big step into close. But see, even my big step is like smaller. But the flags, I told you what, we don't compromise our stance. But you know what I'm talking about. We use a rocker, get them to put their weight a little bit, and then boom, big step and close. If they're just going to try to like stand there and play it off, you know, you can sometimes catch them sleeping that way as well. Because they get into the state where they're like, oh, I'm not going to react to what he's doing. I'm not going to react to that rocker. It doesn't mean anything to me. So make it meaningful next time. And then they'll, you get them like guessing, right? You throw them off. You always want your opponent not knowing what's going to happen. You always kind of want them guessing, and that's what the rocker step's about. Simple little step, but leads into a lot of different things. You can also use it to cover sliding your back foot up, right? Because they're paying attention more to the fact that I did this, right? Not to slide my back foot up to make a bigger closing step. Whereas anyone smart, if they see me, back in, so you can see my feet. If they see me do this, they're like, oh, closing step. More than likely, closing step's happening, right? But if I take their attention away with the rocker and slide my back foot up, now I can take that closing step, right? And it's better. All right? That's some of the things that a rocker's for. Definitely ask me questions if you have them about that, because that one can be like a little bit confusing. Something pretty new that I've been working on, pretty new for me, and I haven't seen it in film fighting, is a skip step, right? So I'll it's not quite a rocker because I'm kind of jumping into it, right? And I'll use it to close. So a rocker comes here. This time I'm actually breaking one of my rules, so just so you're aware of that. It's fine. You know, rules are made to be broken. But I take a skip, and it gets them, again, to put their weight on their back foot, and I can step out from it and do my finish, right? And basketball is used for like switch direction crossovers or whatever. You can catch them. You know, you're dribbling and you come here, but you haven't really committed that hard, and you like can switch back over to the other side, change leads, and you're around them. Well, we can do the same thing in fun fighting, right? We hit that skip step. Now they've reacted. Maybe they put their defense up tight, right? Boom, their defense comes up. I go towards I hit, right? So that's what you're looking for from a skip step. And it's not hard, right? Whatever your lead foot is, you just skip onto it, right? Skip onto that lead. Right foot or left foot, skip step. Then you can take a step. You can skip step, right? Slide the back foot close, right? Everything still slides, but you get big advances that way without what? Compromising our stance for a big advance, right? We don't want to do that. But it implies a threat, right? It's kind of that jab again we were talking about. But just a skip, leads, foot, or not. That's what it's for. It's a footwork trick. It's a fake. It's a footwork bait. It's a bait to get them to do something, and then the follow-up's right behind it, right? Get them flat-footed, get them to swing at you from a bad position. If I can engage, if I'm long range and I come still long range, and you swing something at me that's more mid-range, well, one, I'm going to block it, and then I'll have a very good place for a counter. So for dedicated counter fighters, this is a new way for you to invoke an attack. But that's just like, oh, I'm gonna just wait for them to attack, right? Go ahead and you can come in a little bit, get them to react, get them to throw, attack, whatever, and then finish them from there. All right? So skip step. I'll see if I can post these on the OGN page, or get Noah to share them over here too, so you can see in basketball like kind of what they use a skip step for. And I've translated it some for amp guard, so you can watch those videos and they might or might not help you, but I'm telling you what I would be using it for. Okay, skip step. Yeah, Annette, we did have an issue with the timing on the post. We apologize for that, but everything is recorded and should be available on the channel, so it'll be on YouTube. Okay, cool. I'll put it on OG and YouTube as well. So, all right. So we talked about lateral movements. You know which direction means once. We talked about slight movements. Talked about the powerful lead foot switch. Talked about rocker steps and skip steps. When we got asked the question, we talked about slight movements and backing out laterally. Okay. That's a lot of what we wanted to cover for that. But, you know, basic footwork principles, I want to make sure that you guys have, because when people talk about practicing footwork, they go crazy, right? And you should do things like Travis's video is perfect. Travis did a video on footwork for just a conditioning exercise routine for footwork, and it's good because it's the smaller movements that we need, right, into big explosive movements that are sudden. Good, perfect. You can do ladder drills for sure, especially if you've never used your feet in a very athletic manner and they're not trained to do that yet. Getting a rope ladder and just doing, I didn't bring mine out, but doing the little agility things, you know, stepping in between the ladders, the sideways steps, you know, all that's going to be good. I'm going to put out a ladder drill that I think is more specific to phone fighting. I've been promising it for a while. I haven't gotten to it, but I'm going to get that out there as well. But the key is, if your feet are uneducated, you need to educate them. So teach them. Jump rope is good. Be careful with your knees. But jump rope is very good as well to get your feet trained to move where you want them to. Throwing spin shots is actually super, super good for training your feet, because in order to throw spin shots properly, you have to get your feet in the right place to execute them well. So I teach people spin shots relatively early on, and fighting for that reason, and for another reason, like it makes you feel happy, right? Throwing a spin shot on someone makes you feel happy. Like, oh, I got that. That was cool. It's something. It boosts your confidence a little bit, makes you feel good. But you also have to step in the right places. Like, think about this, and I probably won't teach out the whole shot really, but think about what 5-1-2 looks like, right? If you think about what 5-1-2 looks like just your basic spin, you have to get to a good spot off center, and then you step not quite across, but a little bit, right? And set it up so you can spin, boom, and step out. Right? All that footwork has to be set up, right? A back spin. In order to properly throw, you have to step behind, right? One of the places where we break our rules, you step behind your lead, so you kind of twisted your body up, and now you unwind for the finish, right? Well, training your feet to do that in the heat of battle will really teach you to train your feet to do just about anything, right? Training my foot, be ready to throw a quick 5-1-2, be ready to throw a quick back spin, right? Teaching your feet to do that will teach your feet to do pretty much what you want it to do. So learn those shots, learn the backspin, learn the 5-1-2, learn other spins that force your feet to be in good locations, and that'll kind of give you a leg up. Dots is another good thing to use, right? If you put like the pips of a dice on the floor, you know, in various locations, right? And then you step to it, step to whatever, step here, just learning to train your foot, right? You can use cones to do this as well. And I have a drill on my YouTube page. It's called Yakamahero, Yakamahero. And the drill basically teaches you to step to the cones to throw your shots. So you place cones out, figure out what your range is, and you step to the right places to throw your shots, right? You step here to open, cone there. You step here, that lateral that gets you outside of defense, cone there, right? You come here and step back to full defense, there'll be a cone at that last foot, right? So all of these little tricks and tips to give you a visual aid to put your feet in the right place are super important. They are super important. So, you know, condition yourself to do that. And, you know, just sparring with people, tell yourself, I'm going to move my feet. I'm going to step off spinner, little bits at a time, right? I'm going to try lead foot switching, at least sometimes. If you do it every time, you'll know what's going on. Don't do that. Don't overreact to do it all the time. But the little movements and a closing movement, like stuff like that. Weave it into your regular fighting and learn. Teach yourself little bits at a time. So if you have a sword and board, and if you're spinning, I did it without one, but usually I would put my shield behind my back, right? So if I'm throwing the spin, this would go here, and as I come out, it comes out, right? For a backspin, right? You think about how this goes. I step behind. See how my head stays looking at them? This stays here. Okay, now when I unwind, it's really quick. And my board comes around quick as well. You know, there is a brief period of time, but it's not as fast. Also, be careful that shot breaks swords. So, you know, don't blame me if you break the sword from backspin. Generally, because this part of your sword hits on a backspin, especially if they're closing, it'll snap it. But the true answer too, the other answer is movement is how you cover it, right? If I'm countering someone closing on me, right? Like I'm backing up, right? Back up. They're closing on me. And then this next time, I back up and I cross over, right? As I slide my back foot, I just have to get to this position. So I'm closing, or I back up, boom, put this here. So I'm backing up, now it's here. And as they come forward this time after I back up, I just unwind, boom, and they're just stepping into range, right? So they're at range as I start to spin, and they step into the spin, right? So you kind of cover it with range. If they're retreating and I'm going towards them, they're running away, right? I throw and they run away. I'm covering it with range again, so I already know they're running. Now I step this foot way back here. Let me move back. They're running away from me, right? Boom, range. I step this foot way back here, and then when I unwind, boom, look how far that sword comes out. So I can catch them on their runaway. So, you know, a good sense of range control really helps you land those shots in the safest manner possible. Really any of those shots, right? But those especially, like using good range where they don't have a good counter on your back when you open and throw it is very beneficial. I'm trying not to just teach out the whole spin shots, but that's how you'd use them. You know, I got videos on those spin shots up already, and this was footwork and closing. But the reason why we get off on spins is really just because it helps you learn footwork. And obviously, you see range gets thrown in too, because you want to throw that from good ranges. So yeah, hope that answers your question, Warren. If anyone else has any questions, or know if you think about stuff that I usually cover that I haven't covered here, I'd be happy to add it in. And if anyone has any questions, we'll give a few minutes for me to answer them. But that's pretty much what I had for today on footwork and range. Next Wednesday, we'll go into, so we did footwork and range, we did the fundamentals. Next Wednesday would be combat computer, but I already did combat computer. So I'll likely go into feints next Wednesday. I think that would be the next logical place to go. So we can talk about how feints work and how you set them up, how you build off of combat computer. If you haven't seen combat computer before, then go back and find the video on it. I'll post it on the OGN page, and that will help you be ready for next week. But yeah, definitely, man. Practice everything. You got to practice everything to put it in. So for sure. Noah, did you have anything else?
I just wanted to cover our principal practicals.
Yeah, the ladder drills, the dots, the cone drill that I talked about that's on my page uses a Pell and you have to go through the footwork of of the whole shot, including back to full defense, to use the Pell. So I recommend most of the time you use a Pell. You know, there's benefit to throwing a bunch of shots, especially with your offhands, to get it tuned in. But after that, if you're going to use a Pell, I strongly recommend that you, especially when you're learning new shots, you use every piece of the footwork, including stepping into range, executing the shot, and, you know, getting back out to full defense. Okay? And like I said, track that with your cones. You'll see it on the drill. If you can't find the drill, hit me up and I'll help you find it. But the drill definitely tells you any shot you're going to use, you should cone it out. It's kind of diagramming it, right? You diagram it on the floor with cones, and then you can just pop, 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 pop. What does that do? It builds muscle memory, right? So your feet already know what they're supposed to do. You really want to educate your feet so you're not having to actively think about it the entire time. Most of the time when I'm fighting, you know, I don't go, oh, I need to use my footwork, so I'm going to step this way or step that way. Like, I'm just gonna react and do the things that my feet already know how to do. I don't have to actively think about it anymore, and that's what those drills are for. So I would say that those things, ladder drills, dots, and the cones, they will get you a long way there. I mean, if you want to try to go play game basketball, that'll probably help you a lot. But and jump rope too. We talked about jump rope as well. Just be careful with jump rope because you know, it could hurt your knees a little bit. So you got to watch out for that. And I don't think we have any other questions, right? All right. Well, I want to thank Flack for having me on. You know, obviously, I'm always thrilled to teach at SKBC, and this is our virtual SKBC for the year, so I'm super happy. You know, this is a series. So we built on 2 weeks ago, we built on last week, and this is, or we built on last week, and then this one will be the second one. All right, and we did combat computer kind of out of order, but it would build on that as well. I did it so recently that I don't want to do it again because, you know, people just saw it. So those three things together will all build into where we're going with feints, right? Like, you have to understand your feet, you have to understand range, you have to understand the fundamentals of combat. Then you have to understand combat computer, right? And then understanding combat computer super helps you throw effective feints. So that's why this all builds. So if you're going to come next week, and I hope you do, and you missed any one of those things, check them out and catch up, because it'll really help you to digest the material that we'll do next week. And I don't want to repeat it all again and I didn't repeat it all again from before tonight. So I'm gonna stick with that pattern, because otherwise it'd be like a 3-hour class. And I'm not sure I could do that, but I know you'd get bored after a while, so we don't want to try it.
What we'll do is we'll get this up on the SKBC channel, and then we'll go get those other two videos as well, James. And that way everybody can be prepped for next week.
Yeah, for sure. And I will see you guys next week, and we'll have the timing better next week. And feints is one of my favorite things to do in this game. I can show you how to get people to like windshield their defense, right? I can show you how to make feints to get people like to literally do this with their shields and really react to it. Oh yeah, maybe make them hit themselves in the nose, porno, and you know, we'll talk about how to set that all up, and you know, unsurprisingly, it uses everything that we talked about to build up to it. It uses footwork, it uses all that stuff. So I'll see you guys next week to talk about that. Thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned to the SKBC channel. Stay tuned to the OGN channel. We've got other content coming up on the OGN channel. I know they got other content coming up on the SKBC channel as well. So, you know, we're all in this together. We'll get through it together. I hope to see y'all soon on the field. We can throw foam at each other. Peace.
Thank you so much, James.
Yep, take care.